Hey everybody, it's Tuesday. That means it's Tech Tuesday. Welcome. Be back in just a second. Thanks for joining me. I'm Rick Usey from Zecorum, and it's another Tuesday, which means another Tech Tuesday, 3 o'clock. I do this every week, and today I'm just going to be talking about a few things that are happening in kind of the broadband world with the news. I like to do that every now and then. So let's get right to it. So just a couple things that are happening. Let me see, scroll back up here. So this was a surprise to me. So the IBC show, which is a cable show held in Amsterdam every year, was canceled due to COVID-19. What's surprising to me is this is in September. So we've all seen some shows, maybe some events that have been canceled here in the spring and some in the early summer, but now we're looking at something that was going to be held in September that's being canceled. And it's surprising to me because this is a show that with it being in September, the flu season tends to run, starts to pick up a little bit in October, really doesn't start to hit hard until like December to March. And this is a virus, so it's going to follow the same path as far as with the weather. As weather gets warmer, it tends to wane, and we're seeing that happen right now. So this one was surprising. And it makes me wonder what's going to happen with some other shows. There are shows that have been, well, first off, there's a show like the SETE Cable Tech Expo. That's in October. And I think they're right now maybe in a go, no-go kind of scenario where they're probably trying to decide whether they're going to have their shows. There are some shows that were already canceled. The Canada shows, the Comtech shows, both East and West. They weren't actually canceled. They were postponed. One was postponed for October, one was postponed until November, I believe. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do because they postponed the shows and now they're trying to get people to come back to those. What else is there? Oh, there was the Fiber Connect show that was postponed. That's going to be in December now, in the height of what would normally be flu season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And you can see, down here that, I think part of what's driving the decisions are the people that normally would exhibit there going to feel comfortable sending their folks there. And that's just something we need to get through. It's unfortunate because there's still a lot of people that are very afraid out there. But again, with a show like this in September, by this point, this is going to be the time that if you were at all concerned, this is going to be the least likely time that you would get this virus, just like it would be the least likely time that you would get the flu, would be September. So. But if you're counting on exhibitors and you're counting on visitors and you're not getting the sign-ups, eventually you got to make a decision as to whether you're going to cancel or not. So we'll have to see what happens with the SCTE show coming up in October. They've got another month or so to maybe decide what they're going to do there, and maybe by then people will be more comfortable. It's going to be hard until we get out of this mindset of where we are today. And, with all the masks around and all the measures that are being taken, it's kind of hard to get past everything. So we'll just have to see how that happens. But this was a surprise. We'll see what happens with the other shows. Continuing on the COVID-19 stories, so ISPs now are asking Congress for a bailout. If you recall, the ISPs, a lot of them have signed up to be able to provide free service for people or to not to defer any late payments, or even let people, if they can't pay, to continue to let them have internet service. The FCC asked them to sign up to do that, and they have done that. More than 700 providers have signed up to that pledge. And the FCC, I believe, has extended that into, and it's maybe in here somewhere, into June. So they're asking providers to continue to do that. And you can see here, Verizon said it increased its bad debt reserve in the first quarter to $228 million, based on 800,000 customers, and it says that's mostly their mobile business that have told them that they can't pay their bills. And I guess you probably don't have to prove that. You probably just have to say, I can't pay my bills, and you don't have to pay your bill. So the question is, what happens with those? Do they eventually collect that? Is that just waived? I don't know. The NTCA reported roughly half their members have reported a 20% rise in unpaid bills. And it says we heard from one rural cooperative who is nearly $60,000 in the red in keeping voice and broadband service on for their customers. So this is affecting a lot of providers, because as you can imagine, I think, what is the unemployment rate now? It's over 20%, and I think that represents 20 plus million people that have been knocked out of their jobs because of this. Now, we're starting to open back up, and hopefully this will allow a lot of these people to get back to work. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of small businesses that have closed their doors and may never reopen again. So, and of course, small businesses are a big part of our economy. So we'll just have to see what happens. So this is all unfortunate. It says here, as the first billing cycle since the outbreak of COVID-19 comes to an end, many are starting to see that doing the right thing, maintaining service in some cases without payment, is coming at a substantial cost. So it's nice that providers were able to do the right thing, but it is causing some stress for them, and it's going to be causing stress for a lot of Americans, unfortunately. I thought this was interesting that Charter came out and said that they will offer businesses a free month of service as states reopen. Now, this is really more of a marketing marketing ploy on their case. So what they're basically saying is that if you're a new business customer, they'll give you a free month of service. So it's not really that different. They're just kind of tying it into the COVID-19 theme and figuring that a lot of these companies, when states open back up, they will need a break, and maybe they can provide business service for them. Of course, that would not be very happy for maybe another provider that was providing service and waiving the fees during that time if they had to close their doors, and now they go over to Charter. I don't know how that's going to work, but that's something that Charter is doing. Let's see, COVID-19's impact will evolve the telecommunications industry. So this is an article kind of focusing on where we go from here and how permanent are a lot of these changes that we're seeing. It's mentioning that for the most part, service providers were able to handle the 30 to 40% increase in bandwidth demand, and that's true. Service providers had a lot of overhead built into their networks. They were preparing for their peak times anyway, the times when the kids would be home from school and the parents would be home and everybody would be on the internet. What was the challenge was meeting that higher demand over a longer period of the day. So as I mentioned once in a previous broadcast, we kind of flattened the curve on that as well. So the curve on bandwidth used to go up at the end of the day and then drop back down. Well, now that curve is a little bit higher as more people are home doing more things at more times. Now, one thing that's been a challenge for service providers is on the upstream side. So that was creating new demands that they had not seen. So they're used to the downstream side of people coming home and streaming movies, but there's been a lot more upstream, probably related to lots of Zoom conference calls and those kinds of things. So they've been moving things around in their networks and trying to clean up their upstream networks, maybe using DOCSIS PNM or something like that to improve their upstreams and to be able to provide more capacity there. As some carriers noted, the planned capacity increases for an entire year were reached during the height of the coronavirus pandemic. But now that service providers, businesses, and other organizations know that their employees can work from home, how many will return to the office? That's a big question mark, as companies now have had a lot of employees working at home, and this could be this is any business. It could be internet service providers. It could be any business out there, business customers of ISPs. Now that people are working at home, a lot of companies can be looking at it and going, you know what, we can be efficient at home, and maybe we don't need that big office space. I wouldn't want to be in commercial real estate when this is all over, because they're probably going to see companies that are starting to actually reduce their footprint, I would expect, in their offices, because they can work effectively from home. They can have certain numbers of staff do that, whether that's permanently or just in and out of the office. Let's see, they mentioned that everybody, like a surgeon, can't work at home, but knowledge working at carpeted office spaces, we think there's actually going to be a significant reduction, somewhere in the order of 30 to 40% of employees continuing to work from home. Hey, this worked pretty well. Let's take advantage and save some money on real estate costs. So that's something that we may be seeing here. And then it is a lot easier for consumers. On the consumer side, we think consumers are going to be continuing to be fairly cautious, fairly skeptical. So, consumers like it. Let's say consumer side, just people working at home, people that are working at home today, do they want to go back into the office? Are they afraid of that? Or is it just that it's so much more convenient, not having to deal with traffic every day, saving money on gas, those kinds of things? And then this quote here, it's my belief that that's going to become a little bit of a new differentiation as employees look at where they want to work in the future. Who handled this really well? Who put employees' health first? Who really struggled with that or insisted on people coming to work in a potentially unsafe place or to work potentially in unsafe places? So, do employees look at that? Those that were maybe forced to work or go to work, are they looking at that as we start to open back up again and their choices on who they want to work for? It may be that as companies allow their employees to work from home, that's an advantage for them in hiring, because a lot of employees are going to like that. So again, this is something that's going to be a potential permanent change as we come out of this on the other side of it. This was interesting. The once disappearing phone call is making a comeback. Remember when people used the phone? We have a landline here, and we have it for our alarm system mostly. It rings all the time, and we never pick it up, and it's almost never anything other than a spam call or a political call or something like that. But even with their cell phones, people have phones in their pockets, and they don't use the phone very much. Well, a little bit of that's changing. It's funny, when Lauren Palesser picked up her phone the other day to call a lifelong friend on the other side of the country, her friend answered by asking what was wrong. It's like, why are you calling me? There must be something wrong. So she's saying that in her case, it's because she's just got more time now. So she's at home, she's got more time, so she just picked up the phone. And there's also that whole issue of we're so isolated. Texting is great, but it's not very personal, and you can't get the sense of a conversation. Zooms are nice, but Zooms are, you got to get the camera on. You may not be prepared to have the camera on, that kind of thing. There's something about a phone where you can actually hear somebody's voice and you can interact with them. So the phone is making a comeback. This is interesting. So with COVID happening, suddenly all these phone calls started shooting through the roof we weren't expecting. And that was from AT&T. Voice became the cool app in 2020. AT&T, which owns CNN, I didn't know that, AT&T owns CNN, reported that from mid-March to May 1st, wireless voice calls peaked at 44% above typical levels, and Wi-Fi calling more than doubled. And other telecom services noted the same thing. And I saw that our partner, Alianza, one of our partners that provides us with VoIP service for our customers, also noticed the same thing on their platform, so they're seeing that as well. At the height of the pandemic in March, Verizon was reporting an average of 800 million wireless calls each day. That's nearly double the number of calls made on Mother's Day. And they noticed that on Mother's Day, the calls were up 10%. So that's quite a change for them. And then again, the intimacy of the phone call is unmatched, other than obviously face-to-face, which there's not a lot of that happening right now. And then this really says it right here. A text is so benign, she said, but a Zoom call is so invasive. A phone call is the perfect middle ground. And that's true. Again, sometimes on Zoom calls, I'll hear people like, do I need to turn my camera on? My hair's a mess, and I just don't want to be on the screen. So there's something about a phone call. And ultimately, the rise of phone calls is an extension of people's desire for human connection at a time when they're feeling isolated. That's true. And then I like this. After the conversation ended, her friend texted saying how nice it was to hear her voice. So it's funny that she followed up with a text, but it was nice to hear her voice. And that's true. When when you make that connection on the phone, you do get to hear somebody's voice and chat with them. Let's see, a couple of non-COVID things here, I think. So there's a lot going on, obviously with COVID-19 and the increase in demand for broadband, especially at home. We've seen measures being taken to try to help in areas where broadband is not as prevalent as it is, let's say, in urban areas or suburban areas. I know there's a lot of states that have set up school buses in certain areas with Wi-Fi so that kids that maybe don't have good broadband at home can go buy the school buses and get access there. And there's this continued emphasis on bringing broadband even prior to the pandemic. And one of those was through the USDA fund, and round one has come to a close now. They awarded $744 million. And then they're going to now implement round two. So let's see what we had here. Let's see, USDA Reconnect round one is officially ended with an award of $523,000 to Breda Telephone Company in rural Iowa. And they're going to be connecting, and this is rural, because they're going to be connecting 113 people, 20 farms, and nine businesses in Arcadia, Iowa. And this is where it gets really difficult, obviously, if you're an internet service provider, is how do you make a good case to provide broadband when part of it is going to 20 farms, right? So you've got these huge tracts of land, and you've got 20 customers, and you've got to run fiber generally, or maybe wireless if the area is flat enough. Maybe it is here. It's a telephone company. They're still probably going to be doing fiber. So that's a difficult part of getting broadband everywhere, is how rural we are in places. So we're now moving to round two. So round two will provide funding of $200 million in grants and up to $200 million in loans and up to $200 million in grant loan combinations. And so far, this particular USDA Reconnect round has made 82 awards in 34 states and territories, totaling $744 million. And that could potentially serve 172,000 households, 19,000 small businesses and farms, and more than 500 healthcare centers. And the healthcare centers are really important now too as well with telehealth. I did a broadcast on that a few weeks ago. So telehealth is really a big thing now with people not getting out to their doctors as often. They're maybe afraid to go to the doctor, or maybe the doctors are really busy and they can help diagnose people through a internet connection and cameras and various telehealth devices. So that's important as well. Following on the funding, you've got now the FCC has authorized $7.5 million in CAF II rural broadband funding, and CAF II, that's the Connect America Fund, and this is the second phase of that, and it's nearing an end. So they've given out most of the money on that. So the 6 operators will share $7.5 million, which will go towards the cost of making broadband available to 3,100 unserved locations in 7 states. And when they say unserved locations there, they don't mean like 3,100 homes or businesses. They're talking about 3,100, I believe, census blocks, I think. I'm not totally sure about that, but I know that the CAF funding goes to census blocks or census block groups. Recipient in today's announcement will receive the largest amount is Northeast Colorado Cellular, which is interesting, which will get more than $3 million to make service available at 731 locations in Colorado and 56 in Nebraska. And you can see the others here that were listed. The majority of the target locations will receive service at speeds of 25 megabits per second downstream and 3 megabits per second upstream. And this is actually, the CAF II requirements were 10 by 1. The FCC keeps changing the definition of broadband, and it's not because they can't figure it out. It's because as broadband changes, people can get faster and faster speeds. So they want to make sure that if we're calling something broadband, especially if we're going to be giving out money for it, that people are getting a good quality service. So the 25 by 3 is actually higher than the CAF II requirements, but it is what is going to be required in the next round of funding for the Rural Development Opportunity Fund, which I'll talk about here in a second. As the FCC authorizes CAF II funding for the 6 companies, the Commission is currently planning the new Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, RDOF, which will essentially replace the CAF program. So RDOF is getting ready to be, the auction is in October, so they're getting ready to finalize all of that here very shortly. Today's announcement was the 12th authorization announcement for CAF II, and almost all of the $1.48 billion won has been authorized. So there was $1.48 billion in CAF II, and there's a lot more. There's almost 10 times that, well, not quite, I guess, in the RDOF that's coming up. And that is here. So the FCC has circulated the final framework for the RDOF program, which is the next one, which is taking over for CAF II. They're going to vote on June 9th on the final auction procedures for handing out billions in rural broadband funds, and that is billions. It's the first phase of the program will hand out $16 billion for census tracts where there's no service. And when they say no service, they don't mean that somebody can't get on the internet there. They're saying that they're not going to have, that they don't have 25 by 3 internet, so 25 megabits down and megabits per second down and 3 megabits per second up. If you don't have that in a census tract, then you would be considered unserved. They could have 10 by 1, but they'd still be considered unserved in this case. There's a second phase of $4.4 billion for any money that's left over from phase 1, and that's going to be for building out the remaining tracts on that. So that's coming up. 2 phases, and it's going to be the same process that was for CAF2, and if you were involved in that, you know how convoluted that was. I'm actually looking into that now because I think a great broadcast in the future, maybe next week if I can get it figured out in time, there's math involved, so we'll have to see. There will be math. If I can get it figured out in time, then next week I'll do a Tech Tuesday on the RDOF auction that's coming up and how it works, because it's a reverse auction and it's a descending clock auction. So those two things make it kind of complicated to understand. So I'll be talking about that in a future Tech Tuesday, possibly next week. So that auction is scheduled to begin on October 29th, and again, it will follow much the same rules of the CAF2. So if you were involved in that, it's going to be very familiar to you. And if you want to get a head start on what this is going to be about, you can go look for the CAF2 auction information and find information about that, and you'd be pretty much up to speed if you could study that. And then finally, this is interesting. So top U.S. pay TV providers lost a record of 2.06 million subscribers in Q1 2020. So this is coming into the start of the pandemic at the end of Q1, I guess. So I don't know how much of the pandemic had an impact on that. I would think it would have made it actually go up. So I don't know. The largest pay TV providers in the U.S., representing about 95% of the market, lost about 2,065,000 net video subscribers in first quarter 2020. And you compare that to the first quarter 2019 at 1,025,000, so it's over twice the number of subs that they lost this first quarter of this year compared to the first quarter of last year. You can see that the top providers account for 84 million subscribers, and here's a breakdown here on that. 45 million of those video subscribers are cable companies, satellite TV about 24 million, 8.2 million from telephone companies, and then you've got your top vMVPDs, which would be your over-the-top internet providers at 6.4 million. And not surprisingly, satellite TV is losing and has been losing. So they lost over 1 million subscribers in the first quarter and 810 in the first quarter last year. So a lot of people are moving away from satellite as they can get, as internet gets better and better in rural areas, people can get their TV over their internet connection. They don't necessarily need a cable company or a phone company or a satellite to get their video if they've got good internet. You can see the losses here by the cable companies and the telephone companies, and then you've got, again, your MVPD services. It mentions Hulu, Sling TV, AT&T TV Now. So that's AT&T TV Now is AT&T's answer. It's basically their over-the-top service that they have. So they've now got a little small set-top box. It's a little Android box that you can get from them. So even though AT&T is a DirecTV provider, they bought DirecTV, they're not messing with DirecTV anymore, other than in areas where they can't provide service this other way. So they're kind of ignoring DirecTV now, and they're also not doing video over their Uverse services anymore. So they're really focusing now on this over-the-top option, which provides the same channels that you would get if you had DirecTV from them, except again the little Android set-top box and then getting it over their fiber connection. Not sure if they're selling it if you don't have AT&T as your internet provider. They may be, I'm not sure. But you can see here, even these over-the-top providers lost 320,000 subscribers in the first quarter of 2020, and they had net adds of 225,000 last year, first quarter. So even they have lost some. Now, what's not showing up here is YouTube TV. Maybe they're not publicly reporting, but that's a big one. I know a lot of people have YouTube TV, and it's very similar to these. So they're not included. I don't know if they've lost or gained. My guess would be that they've gained, and maybe some of those gains are from people like Sling and Hulu. And then also, as you've got other services coming out, people have to make a decision on what they're going to keep. So you've got Netflix out there, you've got Amazon Prime where you can get Amazon Video. You've got Disney Plus that has come out since this time. So that may be causing people to maybe cut down, on their budgeting. And of course, you do have, with the pandemic, some of this could be related to people losing their jobs, although for a lot of these companies, cable companies, phone companies, they signed up to be able to let people keep service if they did lose their jobs. So we don't know if there's been that much of an impact from the pandemic. But it seems like video is, it's going to be here to stay. The question is, what's the form going to be? And what we're seeing is a lot of the traditional pay TV providers are now realizing that we really need to get in. If we're going to stay in this business, we either need to, in the video business, we really need to embrace the over-the-top thing, like AT&T is doing, and there's other operators, other cable providers now that are providing over-the-top kinds of TV and getting away from the traditional linear pay TV offering that they had before. All right, well, thanks for joining me. I see Rick Yinger's there. Hey, Rick, thanks for commenting, saying hello. So thanks for joining me. Next week again might be on RDOF. I'm not going to make any promises because I thought I was going to do it for a couple of weeks in a row, and as I get busy, I kind of get sidetracked, and it really is complicated to understand. So maybe if I can get it figured out, that'll be of some value to people that want to maybe look at doing the auction in October, because it is something that's a little bit convoluted, but maybe I can provide some assistance there, because it's not easy to find a lot of information on how that auction works. So thanks for joining me, and I will be back next Tuesday at 3 o'clock. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.